Hey guys, it's Mel Scott here. Given the release of CK3 on consoles, I thought it would be a good time to put together a few guides on some of the more difficult game mechanics that both new and existing players to CK3 struggle with. Today we're going to be looking at the key mechanics around warfare and how you can make sure that you're going to win those battles when you hit that declare war button. Let's dive in. Alright, I've hopped on to Ireland in 1066 and I'm going to jump into the military tab here. This gives you a breakdown of all the different military units available to you. The first type of soldier we're going to be looking at is your levies. Now, your levies are your cannon fodder. They're your most basic troop. You've got a lot of them. They're not particularly powerful on their own, but en masse, that's where they really shine. At least in the early portion of the game. You'll see they have two non-zero stats here. The first one with the little sword next to it is their damage. Essentially what damage does is it feeds into the calculation for how much damage your army will do in each round of battle. Now the actual battles are quite complex, there's a lot of dice rolling and a lot of modifiers that are affecting the calculations. So I won't delve into that too much because it's just going to overcomplicate things. It is worth understanding how the battles work, however. There's essentially four phases. We've got the manoeuvre phase, that's when all your men get into position ready to fight. The early battle phase, where your men start attacking the enemy army, and if you beat them at this stage, you will completely kill all of their units. You then get into the late battle stage where your men continue to fight and rout more and more of the enemy. At this point, when you reduce your enemy in strength, they don't die, they end up becoming routed casualties. If you didn't totally defeat the enemy army in the early battle stage, then it's only in the aftermath stage where you can convert the routed into fatal casualties, meaning you're actually killing those men. Your killing power is affected by your pursuit stat, and your defense against the enemy in this stage of the battle is affected by your screen stat. The other stat here with the little shield is your toughness. You can think of toughness a little bit like HP for the entire unit. For example, with the levies, they've got 10 toughness, so they can take up to 10 points of damage before they're completely reduced in strength to nil. Strength being that 812 out of 812 that you can see there. At this point they would become routed casualties. If you have an army that's 3-to-1 in size and it's just composed mostly of levies, you generally end up winning. You'll see me create an army here where I just take out all of the levies and send them on their own against a much smaller force, and they do in fact win even against someone who has knights and men at arms. So in the beginning, your best rule of thumb is, do I have the sheer numbers advantage? If you can totally overwhelm your enemy, then you're very likely to win. So where do you get your levies from? Well, you get them from your counties that you own in the game, and also from your vassals. The best way to get a full overview of this is to go into the realm window and into the vassals tab. At the bottom, you'll see the number of levies you're getting from your domain, as well as the levies that are being given to you by your vassals. Here we've got some from one of our earls, but we also have a large number from our church holdings. The only reason we're getting those is because our court chaplain has a positive opinion of us. In order to boost your levies, that's one thing you've got to consider. You can increase the number of levies given to you by your vassal by modifying their feudal contract. You can do this through hooks or just by renegotiating the current contract by changing their taxes or giving them certain rights. Here we could move the levy contribution from 25% up to 35%. You can also boost the levies you're getting from your own counties. You can boost this through your martial councillor and through your own martial skill. There's also a number of other things that affect this, such as your realm capital, which gives you a bonus in that specific county. The next type of unit we want to focus on are your men at arms. Your men at arms will bolster your army using a counter system that's very similar to rock paper scissors. It's just a little bit more extended. So we have our heavy infantry units, which counter spearmen. We have our spearmen, who counter cavalry. Our cavalry counter archers. Our archers counter skirmishers. And our skirmishers again counter our heavy infantry, thus completing the circle of life. You also have your siege weapons here like the mangonels, but they don't actively participate in battle, they essentially just help you siege down settlements faster. So not too much to explain here. Now let's have a look at how this actually works out in battles. If you look here, we have roughly the same amount of light horsemen compared to the enemy's bowmen. You'll notice here that the enemy bowmen are having their damage output reduced by around 50%. That's roughly what happens when you have about a 1-to-1 ratio against the enemy men at arms. Once you start getting into 2-to-1 ratios, that can start reducing the enemy unit's damage down to around 10% of its total value. The returns are diminishing the further you go above that ratio. The enemy only have a small amount of horsemen left, and that's only reducing our archer effectiveness by 6%. It's very much the proportion of your men at arms versus the enemies that determine how the counters work. The last type of military unit we have are our knights. Your knight stats are based on something a little bit different to your levies and men-at-arms, and that is their prowess. But what prowess does is it translates into the damage and toughness stats we've already talked about. So each point of prowess gives your knight 100 damage and 10 toughness. In terms of damage equivalence, this knight here, who has a prowess of 19, is actually equivalent in damage to around 190 levies. Because he has a prowess skill of 19 multiplied by 100, that's 1900 damage, the same as 190 levies multiplied by 10. This is also modified by your knight effectiveness stat, which you get by unlocking various things in the game. So for example, if you had a plus 200% knight effectiveness, that would double the amount of damage that your knights are getting. So how do we know if we're going to actually win a war that we're going to declare? Well, I'm going to show you now how you can figure out what sort of enemies you're likely to be facing. Firstly, jump into the character page for the person you are thinking of going to war with. And then you dive into his court and his vassal screen, and just have a look through the characters. That gives you a good idea of the sort of knights and their prowess level that you're going to be facing. We do it here with this guy, and then when I jump into battle with him, you can see that those are the same vassals, the mayors and the marshal, that have actually turned up to fight in the battle. For levies and men-at-arms, it's a little bit more straightforward. Just go into the character screen for the person you're going to attack, and hover over this icon here that has the number of soldiers they have. It will also give you a breakdown of men-at-arms if you hover over it. You need to also have a look at their gold balance too, because they're going to be able to hire mercenaries with that, as well as any alliances that they may have, which appears in the diplomacy window underneath the icon for the number of troops. Last thing you want to consider is where you're actually going to fight the battles. If you jump into the terrain map mode that you can find down in the right hand corner, that will give you a good overview of what terrain you're likely to face in the region that you're going to war. Men-at-arms sometimes have bonuses or disadvantages depending on where the battle's taking place, so if you've got, for example, an army that's composed mainly of archers, then you want to be trying to position yourself on a hill. Hi guys, it's Mel Scott here. If you've got any suggestions on things you'd like to see me make content for CK3, then join the Guilded server I've created, because in there you can chat with other community members and also speak to me about all things CK3 related. If you like this video too, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, and also be sure to check out my other content, for which links are coming up now. Thanks very much guys, and hope to see you next time.